That morning, sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, making the entire room especially bright. My name is Emily Stewart, a senior at Jefferson High School. We were in biology class, and the teacher was explaining the structure of DNA. My mind was elsewhere, thinking about the prom that evening. Suddenly, the PA system emitted a harsh noise, followed by the principal's tense voice, instructing us to immediately close and lock the classroom doors and windows, remain quiet, and wait for further instructions. The classroom fell silent, and everyone turned their heads toward the PA speaker in the corner of the room. The teacher quickly walked to the door, locked it, and then signaled us to stay quiet. My heart began to race, my palms started to sweat, and an atmosphere of unease filled the air. Suddenly, we heard chaotic footsteps and screams coming from the hallway, as if something terrifying was happening. After a while, the commotion in the hallway began to die down, but we could still hear distant screams and cries. Suddenly, a low, sinister laugh echoed from outside the door, filled with madness and malice. We all held our breath, eyes fixed on the classroom door. The door was violently kicked open, and a man dressed in a clown costume stood in the doorway. His makeup was grotesque and twisted, with a grin stretched to his ears, revealing a row of yellowed teeth. He held a gleaming knife in his hand, with fresh blood dripping from the blade. He stepped into the classroom, his cold eyes scanning us. The teacher stood at the front of the room, trying to shield us with his body. His voice trembled, but he tried to remain calm. The clown glanced at him briefly, then smirked and continued walking, seemingly selecting his next victim. Fear spread through the classroom like wildfire, and everyone held their breath. My heart pounded faster and faster, my throat tightened, and I felt like I was about to suffocate. The clown walked to the center of the room, raising his knife and casually waving it around, savoring the terror on our faces. Suddenly, he fixed his gaze on a boy sitting in the front row. The boy was trembling all over, his eyes filled with fear. The clown slowly and cruelly walked toward him, each step radiating menace. The boy tried to move, to escape, but his legs felt like they were filled with lead, and he couldn't budge. Just then, we heard urgent footsteps approaching from outside. The clown quickly turned, his face lighting up with a twisted glee. He swiftly locked the door again and returned to the center of the room, as if waiting for something. Time seemed to stand still, each second dragging on unbearably. Suddenly, the door was hit with heavy blows, clearly someone trying to break in. The clown's eyes gleamed with manic excitement as he tightened his grip on the knife, ready for a fight. The pounding on the door grew more intense until it finally burst open. Several heavily armed SWT officers stormed in, quickly surrounding the clown and attempting to subdue him. The clown fought back frantically, swinging his knife wildly, but was eventually overpowered. As the clown was led out of the classroom, I finally exhaled a long breath, feeling completely drained. I collapsed into my chair, my heart slowly returning to a normal pace, but the fear lingered deeply in my mind. We later learned that the clown was an escaped mental patient who had grabbed a knife during his escape from the asylum and then broke into our school. Although the incident was over, the terrifying experience that day left me shaken for a long time. Every time I walked through the school hallways and saw the repaired doors and windows, I couldn't help but recall that grotesque face and the fear he brought with him. Time can heal wounds, but that deep-seated fear will never be completely erased. That morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of the high school classroom, adding a touch of warmth to the tranquil space. We were in the midst of a history lesson, discussing the brutality of World War I and the heroism of those who fought in it. Suddenly, a piercing alarm echoed through the entire campus, followed by the urgent voice of the principal over the intercom. Attention, all students and faculty. Please lock all doors and windows immediately, remain quiet, and await further instructions. The classroom fell silent instantly, with students exchanging nervous glances, their minds filled with uncertainty and unease. The hallway outside erupted with clamor, as if a sense of impending doom loomed closer. I immediately followed the teacher's instructions, closing the windows, drawing the curtains, and then retreating to a corner of the classroom, hoping to hide as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the door of the classroom burst open with tremendous force, and a stranger barged in. Dressed in black attire and wearing a mask, the intruder's demeanor was cold and ominous. I couldn't help but feel a wave of panic wash over me, wondering who he was and why he had come here. He began to search the classroom as if looking for something of great importance. I struggled to control my breathing, afraid to make a sound and alert the intruder to our presence. My heart pounded in my chest, and sweat dripped from my palms as I tried to remain calm. The intruder's eyes scanned the room, seeming to search for something specific. He paused, his gaze settling on a corner of the classroom. Fear gripped me as I worried he might discover our hiding spot. Suddenly, he lifted an object in his hand as if he had found what he was looking for. My heart sank as I wondered what would happen next. I held my breath, silently praying for it all to end quickly and for us to emerge unscathed. However, the intruder did not leave. Instead, he continued to search the classroom, his interest piqued by our belongings. I felt a surge of despair as I realized we were trapped, with no means of escape. He moved swiftly, searching every nook and cranny of the classroom. I felt a sense of hopelessness wash over me, as if we were doomed to remain in this dire situation forever. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks, his eyes locking onto me. I braced myself, unsure of his intentions and what he planned to do next. I tried to maintain my composure, masking my inner fear, but my palms were already slick with sweat. He approached me, his gaze cold and menacing. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, as if my fate had been sealed and there was no escape. I closed my eyes, bracing for what was to come. But then, in a surprising turn of events, the door of the classroom was kicked open and a team of uniformed police officers stormed in. They quickly subdued the intruder, apprehending him and leading him away. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a tremendous sense of liberation wash over me. Though I didn't know who the intruder was or why he had targeted our classroom, I was grateful for the timely arrival of the police, without whom the outcome could have been far worse. Later, we learned that the intruder was a fugitive who had been on the run for years. He had broken into the school in search of an item he believed to be hidden there. Though the ordeal was over, the experience of that day stayed with me, teaching me the importance of remaining calm in times of crisis and seeking help when needed. That morning, I arrived at school early, ready to face another day of classes. The campus was as lively as usual, with students chatting in groups on the playground. When the bell rang, my classmates and I walked into the classroom, and the teacher began the first lesson of the day. The first period was history. The teacher wrote the day's topic on the blackboard. Everyone was focused, and the classroom was filled only with the sound of the teacher's voice and the scratching of pens on paper. However, this peace was soon shattered by a commotion outside. Suddenly, there was a cacophony of hurried footsteps and screams in the hallway, as if chaos had erupted. We all stopped writing and looked at each other, puzzled and concerned. The teacher frowned and walked to the door to see what was happening. A few of us stood up, trying to peer out the window. At that moment, the classroom door was flung open, and a student burst in, pale-faced and gasping for breath. "Lock the door," he shouted. "Someone's broken in, and they have knives." Instantly, the classroom fell into a deathly silence. Everyone was stunned, unable to process the gravity of the situation. The teacher reacted quickly, slamming the door shut, locking it, and barricading it with a desk. We all knew this could be dangerous, but none of us had anticipated anything this severe. Time seemed to slow down. We heard more screams and the sound of things being overturned, indicating the intruders were causing havoc. My heart was racing, and my mind was a blur of confusion and fear. The teacher tried to calm us, urging us to stay quiet, though his own voice wavered slightly. "Everyone, get under your desks, and don't make a sound," he whispered. We obeyed immediately, curling up under the desks, breathing as quietly as possible. The classroom was filled with a heavy, oppressive silence, as if the very air had become dense with tension. After what felt like an eternity, we heard footsteps in the hallway, growing closer. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The footsteps stopped at our door, followed by the sound of someone pounding on it. We held our breath, terrified that any noise might draw attention to us. "Open the door," a deep, harsh voice demanded, "or we'll break it down." The teacher did not respond, pressing harder against the door. Then came an even louder crash against the door, as if they were truly intent on breaking it down. My heart raced, and my thoughts became jumbled. I had no idea who these people were or why they were doing this, but one thing was certain: they were extremely dangerous. Suddenly, the window shattered, and a masked man reached in, trying to unlock the door. We were paralyzed with fear, unable to move as we watched this unfold. The teacher tried to stop him, but the man was strong and quickly managed to unlock the door. The door was flung open, and several masked men stormed in, each wielding a knife. Their eyes were cold and ruthless as they appended desks and dragged us out from our hiding spots. A tall man grabbed me, his grip so tight that I couldn't break free. They herded us into a corner of the classroom, ordering us to crouch down and stay silent. The entire process took only a few minutes, but it felt like hours to me. My mind was blank, and I could only follow their commands mechanically. They seemed to be looking for something or perhaps waiting for something. They threatened us to stay still while they kept communicating on their phones. My heart was filled with fear and despair, uncertain of what would happen next. Other students looked equally terrified, some even beginning to cry softly. Suddenly, we heard sirens in the distance. The police had arrived. A slight sense of relief washed over us, but it was quickly replaced by anxiety, unsure if this would anger the intruders. Indeed, they became more agitated, pointing their knives at us and warning us not to make any sudden moves. After a while, we heard a police officer's voice from outside, demanding that the intruders surrender. The men grew impatient, whispering among themselves, and then one of them walked to the door and shouted, "We want to negotiate. If you don't meet our demands, we'll start killing hostages." The tension in the classroom skyrocketed. We knew our lives were entirely in the hands of these violent men. The police and the intruders began a tense negotiation, trying to reach some kind of agreement. But the intruders were clearly not planning to give up easily. Their demands grew increasingly unreasonable, and the police seemed to be stalling for time. Just then, a student suddenly stood up, attempting to escape amidst the chaos. In that instant, everyone's eyes were on him. One of the intruders reacted swiftly, chasing him down and threatening him with a knife. My heart leapt into my throat, but I also felt a surge of admiration for his bravery. However, this sudden action made the situation even more volatile. The intruders became more aggressive, using harsher threats to keep us in line. They patrolled the classroom, keeping a close watch on us. We had no choice but to comply, terrified of provoking them. Time crawled by, each second feeling like an eternity. The police continued their negotiations outside, but progress seemed minimal. Just as we were beginning to lose hope, a loud bang echoed from outside the window. It turned out that a SWAT team had been stealthily approaching and was attempting to breach the classroom from the window. Chaos erupted in the classroom. The intruders panicked, using us as human shields in a desperate bid to escape. But the SWAT team was well prepared. They swiftly stormed into the room, engaging the intruders in a fierce struggle. We dropped to the floor, trying to avoid getting hurt. The entire ordeal lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like a lifetime to us. The SWAT team eventually subdued all the intruders and took them into custody. The classroom was filled with cries and exclamations, but mostly sighs of relief. Afterward, the police began questioning us and arranged for counselors to provide us with support. I still felt weak and shaky, my heart pounding. Although the danger had passed, the fear and despair lingered. The school was soon locked down, and our parents came to take us home. That night, I barely slept, constantly replaying the day's terrifying events in my mind. The next day, the incident was all over the news, and the school announced it would be temporarily closed for a thorough safety inspection. While time may eventually heal the wounds, the memory of that day will never fade. Whenever I think back to it, I still feel a pang of anxiety. But, at the same time, I have come to understand the fragility and value of life. That day's experience made me cherish the present even more and taught me how to find hope in the face of despair.